with, and then look at the could haves. It's called the Moscow project management reference. So must have, could have, should have, would have, right?
Mm.
All those things. And you start with the must. In sales, Jason, let's bring it into sales, right?
Yep.
Again, you need to understand how AI can support sales, not take over sales, not do your sales, but support good sales processes, right? And that's where people think that sales now should be all about inbound, and you create all these marketing campaigns and it's all automated. You can put your head in the sand. I call that the ostrich syndrome, where you put your head in
Mm.
the sand and just hope for the best, right? Keep your head down. No, it's not that. Sales, more important than ever, is all about these touch points. And it's more important than ever to create these customer relationships, because guess what? Customers aren't as loyal as what they used to be. So it's important to make sure you have a process, a system that supports good buying experiences, Jason, that lead to good decisions, good purchasing decisions, and then on to customer experiences, right? And
Yeah.
how you have to learn, where does I fit in that? So there's the human side, as you talk about the systems and the soft
Mm.
and system side, they have to complement each other. There's an element, there's a commitment by both in the process to get right, not one or the other on its own.
Yeah, there's a balance, I think, of
Yeah.
two sides to it: the human touch and the digital's touch. So, look, when we talk about automation, this is where AI really helps, because it's such a wonderful tool to cut down time. And we're all time risk adverse now. There's so much going on. There's a lot more pressure in the marketplace to actually deliver results. So, if you can help systemize your process and use powered AI for your efficiency plus your automation to maybe have that initial reach out to people, but make it personalized, make it by a person. So you can use ChatGPT or you can use Bard or whatever, but make sure what the end result is personalized from you. It could give you ideas about outreach. It could give you ideas about how to email people correctly. Could actually reconfigure it. Grammarly has been used for a long while. My grammar's not the best. I use that tool to help with my grammar, and that makes a huge difference. Plus, it conditions me to make sure I'm sending something out that's correct, maybe persuasive, maybe influential, but maybe quite short as well. So you have to have that human approach to that, just to make sure your time consuming process is good, but make sure it is. And we do add in the data without adding in the personal data to what we've heard from our clients when we've actually spoke to them or when we're doing outreach. Then we are actually inputting it within your system, your CRM, or whatever process that you have, because without that data, AI is pretty useless, really. It's going
Well,
off whatever's going out there. So you
Well,
cannot do
rubbish
it
in,
without.
rubbish out, Jason. It's always rubbish in, rubbish out
Yeah.
at the end of the day. So if you're leaving so much loose input to the people using the systems, you're limiting your like opportunity when you're using any of those systems. So it's important. The interfaces are super important. So you can encourage good data capture, number one, Jason. And like for me, everything about sales is the human touch. The first thing when you build your sales process, and if anyone who hasn't gone putting post-its on a wall to build out their sales process, I advise you to do that, number one, so you can get a view of how you do sales today. Then you look at the view, well, how should we be doing sales? And then when you look at that, you build the touch point, the experiential element on it. So what has to be right in this according to the process when we have those touch points with our potential customers to ensure a strong buying experience. So there's multiple layers, Jason. And even that's why I say, even when you do all that, you're still a long way off just looking into AI, because there's so much to get right
Yeah.
before you look at AI. And then, as we said, Jason, what's the best use of digital stroke AI in sales? And that's where you need to really, again, look at your process. Where can automation and sales support good processes?
Mm. At this stage, I'd like to invite the people that are listening. We have 9 people listening at the moment So we have some really good people here. So anyone would like to raise their hand and come and be part of the conversation, either to ask a question or add in value? Because like Shay and I are good at what we do, but it's also good to get a good understanding of where other people are and their understanding and where they considered within using AI. Um, but also the downside of it as well, because we know there's always downsides to every upside, and like dependency, and the initial implementation and the learning curve. There's still a learning curve there, and sales reps, as we know, can be quite the laziest people in the world when they're not adding in data. And there's also a change management there as well, which needs to be implemented and trained into every organization, whether they're large or small, to actually add this system within their processes of other things that they need to do, but it needs to be done in a changed way that is adding value to the
But
organization.
yeah,
But
and that's the problem, Jason, right? And that's the other thing. And I do a lot of this work. We call it business readiness when you do some sort of change program. Guess what, Jason? A lot of people when they implement systems, they just think again, ostrich syndrome. They just think once you put it in, everybody knows how to use it.
yeah,
And the problem with that, Jason, is that people don't have any relationship with the piece of software. Okay. So there has to be some sort of development work that involves everyone who's going to be using it. They need to feel part of something before you want them to use it. And if you don't do that, you've already lost. So
yeah,
again, Jason, there's so many parameters and variables that you need to understand before you do anything. And again, you need to really understand what do you want the AI to do
mm,
as opposed to what a human should do. And you mentioned a few very important points there. The downside, when you assume it'll do everything for you, you've already lost. It's so important to know the differences where AI can support you. And then, as you said, when you implement that change, Jason, nothing ever implements correctly first time. So there's an after implementation support element and maintenance element that needs to be fully looked to. And also, Jason, one of the big things I'd imagine with these companies is how do they manage all the GDPR questions and concerns? And I don't have an
yeah,
answer for that yet, but I'd imagine they're going to come up against a lot of roadblocks when it comes to this.
yeah. I've been working with a company, quite a large insurance company, and they've got a quite an old system in place at the moment, and the the heads are actually screaming. So, well, we need this. But where do
Mm,
they need it along the process? Because they still get inbound calls, but they still got outbound calls. So how are they going to use it to make sure it works in their favor? Whether there's a bot, whether there is some spoken AI language words being used, but then it has to come into the place where, okay, it's being efficient here, but now we do actually need to speak to a person. So the human touch is so very important in all of this stuff. Everything that we have has to have a human touch and have to have, what I was going to say is you can't over rely on it,
yeah.
because
Well, Jason, to that point, AI should only be used to support the human touch,
yep,
right?
yeah, I
That's
agree,
where I would see the best use of AI is to
absolutely,
support the human touch, right? That's the way I will describe it. Where the other key benefit of using AI stroke digital automation is for automation to do all that sort of um, underground work that can help you process things a lot better because it can create great efficiency. So the people doing the process are focusing on the value element of those processes, right? So when you put good Where AI really comes into his own is the data insights, the predictive and propensity modeling. And so when you get that really good AI in, then you can analyze your data and see what's working well with our prospects and customers, what's not working well, what do we need to change? And that's the big question, Jason, where you need to answer yourself when you look at all this data, how can AI support you with that question?
Yep.
What do we need to change?
I do apologise. I actually cut out then. So the human touch sometimes has the downside of it because I messed around and I completely lost the audio. But I'm back now. So we spoke about privacy and security and the learning curves, but the implementation process as well, which is also quite big as well. I'd love to get an opinion of someone in the audience listening now. If you want, love to raise your hand. We'd love to get you up on the stage to add to the conversation, or maybe ask a question from your perspective and how you see it with the complexity and maybe the how it can actually add more value than you think. I've been looking at another tool which is AI driven to actually make pictures and images, but that's for a marketing style process. But that's just something else, and there's so many other things that we can use and utilize it just to do our outbound, make it more creative, so it's more engaging with people and add a lot more value to the customer journey because it is
Yeah.
about the customer journey, but also getting on side so we can actually pick up that phone or have that Zoom or actually see people in the real world,
Mm.
which adds in other concerns about communication, effective communication. And I'm in two minds about this. Is the generation coming through being less is the what am I trying to say, is the emotional intelligence behind what they do rather than hiding behind the technology before they actually speak with people. But I also, maybe that's a conversation for another time, because that area of human touch is just so very important, and how we communicate with another person. And I've seen it in organizations, I'm sure you have, Shay, and I'm sure everyone else has, is people will hide behind it. They will, what they used to do is hide behind an email, and then they might get a general bite, but they still hide behind the email and they won't pick up the phone or engage with the person and make a call or Zoom call or whatever it needs to be done as the first initial approach to actually engaging with that client. And I think that's just so very important. And I know AI will help streamline that approach, but we do need to get on to engaging with people.
Yeah. And just staying on the human element, Jason, I'd imagine there's a concern for people about job losses.
Yeah.
Like a lot of AI, a lot of conversation about AI now is about job losses, right? And there's a lot of media toxicity, I believe, at the moment. And I don't believe that's the case, Jason. Like, I believe where things will change, there will be a disruption, there will be a change. Where I see the human touch and the human element is more on the value added side. So when you can automate all the stuff on the ground, when you can improve better predictive and propensity modeling and data and insights, when you can get systems to do that for you, that frees up a lot of capacity and resources, Jason, to focus on the
Mm.
value element. So if you're looking to increase your targets, this is a great strategy to improve your targets and use the people within the system for developing new sales and new leads, all the value driven elements of it. So I don't necessarily believe there will be a concern. I also believe when it comes to humans, people don't like change, Jason, as we've talked about already. They will resist it. And people go through this, the mourning curve, the MOU or NING. I suggest everyone to just have a look at that. They go through this mourning curve when a change happens, and they'll go through the emotional side, whether it's fear, anxiety, stress, anger, because you've been doing stuff for so long a certain way, Jason, then you're being told you need to change. So the goal is to bring them along that journey through that emotional curve as quickly as possible without rushing them, right? The best way to do that
Mm.
is bring people involved in the journey.
Yep.
And then eventually they'll come to the logical side where they go, well, like, it's happening. How can I do my best with it? How can I get the best out of it? How can it serve me? Right. So you bring people along this journey. And as I said, a big part of that is education. As I don't believe AI in this particular case is going to have any impact on jobs. I believe it'll make the jobs humans do more valuable, and increase those touch points with potential customers, with your customers, increasing the customer experience. So then there's so much else your teams can do
Mm.
that are customer facing that will add value to them.
I was just actually thinking while you were speaking, many years ago, people used to knit by hand. And then there was an automation process where they had these big woolen mills that they used to industrialize it. And everyone got scared they're going to lose jobs, but jobs were made. And as we go through every generation, there's something else taken away from another job to make it easier. And as technology has come into its full remit and AI is at the very first steps of helping people, but there's always another job on the back of that, which is going to free up something else. So there'll be something else there. So maybe it's going to help us be more efficient and maybe it's going to be better for us. Okay, there'll be jobs losses, but there'll be job gains as well based on
Yeah.
this. So we have to always look on the positive sides of things because it will, as everything, make a new job out of it.
Yeah,
And
but that's exactly it, Jason. And this is why it's so important to do the research,
yeah,
build a set of requirements. Well, what is missing in your current? What's your strategy? And this
yeah.
goes back to basic principles of business, Jason. What is your sales strategy, right? Where do you want to be? What demographics do you want to impact? Who is your target audience? Where are they? Where do they hang out? Build that view. Then define where are you today? What's working well? What's not? What do you need to change? Then you look at all the things you need to do. And then you start looking at the AI and digital side of things where can these systems support that journey? And I emphasize that word support, not take over, not do, not replace, but support.
Mm.
And that's where you start building a set of business requirements, which you then turn into the digital element. And then you look to the marketplace. Well, what systems do we need?
Um, as again, I remind everyone if you want to get involved in the conversation, we've got some talented people here in the audience. If you want to just hold your hand up, we'd love to get you up on the stage just to give your side or ask a question. If you just want to do that, we welcome you just to add some more value to what we're discussing today because it is an important conversation that we're having today. And it does add more impact to maybe what you're doing, but or I always like to say share and grow together. And everyone has an idea. And there we go. Jonathan's just come up. Allow him to speak. So, welcome, Jonathan. Thank you for coming on board. So, if you'd like to ask a question or add to the conversation.
Thank you very much. I did join partway through, so I don't feel qualified in case things have already been mentioned. But artificial intelligence sales tools, I tend to use it at this point in time in the marketing capacity, actually on platforms like LinkedIn,
Yeah.
to help write posts, to help put my thoughts in a sort of, ChatGPT kind of format that would be higher visibility and whatever,
Mm.
present the story. AI powered sales tools, I think, have got a wide range and a large scope to come. And as an accountant, I know that whatever tricks we try to pull to streamline and make things more efficient, I completely agree with your comments that there will always be jobs out there. So if you feel that your job is being threatened, to my mind, it's a case of tweaking it. So if you're a copywriter worried that, the sort of things I'm doing with ChatGPT are going to ruin your career, well, you need to be doing something where you utilize the ChatGPT and you're selling yourself as someone who reviews these kind of things. There's always a higher level. There's always a way of stepping back and almost managing the machines. These machines may break, may not be as robust as we think. And what I love about the concept of AI is a lot of us are getting a bit scared. A lot of us are getting a bit sort of like, oh my goodness, I need to brush up and learn how to best use it. But at the end of the day, it's a tool. And I'm looking forward to the time where I can turn around and say, my lawyer's AI will speak to your lawyer's AI, and we will resolve this matter in an appropriate fashion. And the other thought that comes to my mind with the AI of the ChatGPT, and I appreciate it's an aside to what you're commenting on, is this idea of, I think I'd want to reverse engineer. I'd want some sort of software that works out what was the input put in such that this was the output. So if
Mm,
somebody writes this amazing draft, legal document or whatever it might be, or a sales pitch or a marketing effort, I almost want to reverse engineer and say, where did that come from? But using sales tools for the AI, taking that personal touch out of it is really going to cripple the concept of being personable.
Mm.
And that, I think, is a loss. So as long as the tools are used carefully and sensibly, there's still got to be that human element. And this idea of what did I input or what did I bring to the floor, I think is really important. People do business with people. Even
mm.
when you're at a shop, and forgive me, I'm conscious that these platforms are international, so I'm going to use Tesco. I could use Walmart, I'm sure. But when you're at the Tesco shopping experience and you're thinking, which person am I going to ask my question to, or which checkout assistant am I going to use? You're doing a sale. You're
Mhm.
still able to use the scanning devices and whatever
Yeah.
else, but you still have to pick which person. And I think if we forget that there's a person behind it, we're kind of ruining it.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, Jonathan, and it like totally complements what we were saying. It should support those human connections, right? And as you said, there's different tools that different at different stages of the sale funnel that are very useful. Like ChatGPT is a great tool to really work on your script and copyright when you're opening connections, right? Powerful. And I totally agree with you. Say people who are concerned about losing their jobs should learn how they can master these systems so they can actually have more output for more clients, right? So there's an opportunity for business growth there straight away. But towards your later end of the funnel, Jonathan, like your point is very well taken about where to use AI and how to best service people. And you being an accountant, I'm sure you appreciate the value of data and insights and trends, right? Where when you get good information into these systems, AIs are great at looking at predictive modeling, right? Look at all the information, what worked well over a course of a period of time, right? What worked really well? What can we predict in the future that will work really well? And then there's another type of tool or modeling you can do, which is propensity. It's taking it to the next step. So it's very powerful that, well, like this is what the predictive model is saying, but let's just open it up a little bit more and say, ask it some questions. What if this? What if that scenario? How can we leverage it? So you can put in scenario based modeling. And that is very, very powerful, Jonathan, when you want to try new things. Obviously, keep your existing funnel going, but you do a little bit on the side and pilot new ideas. And eventually you'll find something that will stick with your customers. And this will short circuit that whole process. So it's very, very powerful. The other place where
I was going to
AI can
say,
be,
actually, just before we get into that, is when you're starting to think, and especially with marketing or whatever, is expressing new ideas where you put pen to paper and maybe mind map things. Now you can just go backwards and forwards to mind mapping
yeah,
ideas with AI to expand your thoughts, expand them where you might not have ever got to unless you're in a big room of people. It just allows you to go a little bit more freestyle and be a little bit more creative and go, oh, I never thought of that. But let me just put it back down to brass tacks and then share my ideas with other people and see where I need to go from there. Um, I'm quite big into L&D and learning and development. So if I was to look at how I can do this in a development style, I would use the Bard and I would use Chat GPT, but then I would bounce between the two of them to get the best decision. And I go, well, I'll take elements out of that. I'll take elements out of that. And then I will put that into a deck and then expand it with my thoughts and feelings and my area of expertise, because it has to come from your area of expertise behind this. Sorry, Shay.
yeah, no problem at all. And the other tool that I see very powerful for large companies is a thing called ORTIM, real time interaction management, right? And that's total personalization. So instead of companies doing a cohort for marketing campaigns, they can create one-to-one marketing campaigns. And they can, if so, give an example. First of all, any airline that you would look to fly with, they're using this. So if you're on their airline, if you've set up a profile with this airline and they see you're on either a web platform signed in or on your app signed in, that you're looking at a few places, you will get marketing for that place very soon after. And they'll ask you questions. That is very, very powerful for these large multinational companies. And so we've talked about a combination of tools there. We've talked about the chat GBT at one level. We've talked about the propensity and predictive modeling on another, which then feeds into your marketing along with ORTIM. So there's an AI for practically every step of the process now that can take out a lot of the human grunt work, allowing humans to do the value elements. And this is where the whole point of real-time interaction management, when it's done ethically, it's extremely powerful because you're only marketing to people who are looking for a service. And just to give an example, I do a lot of work with financial institutions, and someone may have got a mortgage off a certain financial institution. 3 weeks later, they're getting marketing in the door about getting a mortgage with that same bank. And that then doesn't give the right message for that bank, that they don't know what they're doing. And that happens a lot with these big companies. So when you do this correctly, it can be very powerful. But again, it supports the human touch.
Yeah. Look, we pretty much reached the witching hour. We normally do these every Thursday, and we keep it to about 30 minutes. And every week we come up with a different idea and a different topic and a different narrative. Like, because AI is massive at the moment, this is just the tip of the idea of the discussions that we can have on this particular subject. We might elaborate a little bit further and slightly change the narrative for next week, but we want to make sure that we have as many people up on stage as possible, just so it helps with the ideas that we're progressing and pushing out, and so we can get a different point of view, because it's all about that share, grow together. And that's what I'm always about as well, and I know Shay is as well. So last minute thoughts, Shay.
As I said at the very beginning of this conversation, choose AI stroke digital deliberately.
Yeah. From myself, make sure whatever you do use, have the human element and the human touch to it. So it's all personalized. So there's a connection there. People like people and brands they like, trust, and can connect with. That's just hugely important. Jonathan, as you're up here as well, any last thoughts?
If I can add a last thought, sometimes using AI or very efficient systems can help you climb the wrong tree all the more faster. And all I would add is you need that personal touch, whether it's a monitor, supervisor, reviewer, call it what you will, that is that personal touch. We